So the U.S. Secretary of State just went to Germany to tell Europe that they're part of the family, but his speech sounded less like a partnership and more like a list of demands from an abusive ex.
It's a total global demotion. While Marco Rubio is busy reciting the names of Mozart and the Beatles to distract from the fact that NATO just stripped the U.S. of major command roles, Canada's economy is quietly lapping the Americans.
Today, we're looking at the 3 signs that the American century is being dismantled from the inside, and why the world is looking north for stability while Washington melts down.
Welcome back, everyone. We're Dave and Deb, and yes, we're still broadcasting from the condo upstairs of the world's most chaotic downstairs neighbor.
So, let's get into it. Marco Rubio rolls into the Munich Security Conference yesterday. The largest U.S. delegation ever is behind him, and he starts talking about how America is a child of Europe.
It was heartwarming stuff. He's praising Western civilization, Dante, Shakespeare, the Sistine Chapel. You could practically see him thinking, if I say shared values enough times, maybe they'll forget we're threatening them with 100% tariffs.
He says all the right lines. We don't want to dismantle NATO. We don't want to destroy the UN. We want to reform them. We want a strong Europe in the alliance. We want to stand together.
Sounds familiar? It's Carney's framing. We're not burning it down, we're building it stronger. Except when Carney says it, he's talking about climate rules, trade diversification, and democratic guardrails.
He's trying to hijack Mark Carney's momentum. In Davos, Carney was praised for saying the world cannot rely on the U.S. the way that it used to. Carney talked about a new kind of leadership, coalitions that are serious about energy, trade, and democracy.
So Rubio shows up in Munich trying to claw some of that credibility back by essentially doing a high-budget cover version of Carney's speech, but with a toxic twist.
Yeah, Rubio is there on Trump's agenda, remember. He tells Europe to embrace hardline migration policies, stop being ashamed of colonial history, dump what he calls a climate cult, and treat nation-states like they're collectible action figures from 1914.
We love Europe. We're Europe's child. Also, please copy our far-right domestic policy and dump any measures to help save the planet while you're at it. It's a weird pitch.
Definitely. We saw a post online by Arlene Dickinson that really nailed it. It said, it's like an abusive partner saying, we want a relationship as long as you want what we want. It's not us, it's you. Don't rock the boat and anger us or there'll be consequences.
And AOC was right there in the same building, tearing it all apart. She warned that Trump isn't looking for an alliance. He's looking to carve out the world so he can command the entire Western Hemisphere like it's his own private fiefdom.
And Europe's reaction is fascinating. On stage, everyone smiles and thanks him for the reassurance. Ursula von der Leyen calls him a good friend. The German and Finnish foreign ministers talk about being satisfied with the tone.
But then you actually listen to the content. The French foreign minister basically says, nice speech. Doesn't change our strategy. We're building a strong, independent Europe anyway, with or without whatever Washington feels like this week.
That's the polite version of, we'll clap for you, but we're not tying ourselves to your choices again.
And Rubio sort of admits it in his own way anyway. He keeps insisting they're heirs to the same civilization, that they're in this together, that America doesn't want to be caretaker of the managed decline.
So what Rubio is really doing here is damage control. He's trying to calm everyone down just enough that they don't fully pivot away without actually changing the policies that made them nervous in the first place.
And compared to Carney, it's night and day. Carney talks about building a rules-based order that smaller and mid-sized countries can trust, so no one is held hostage by one superpower's mood swings.
Rubio talks about greatness, empires, and how the West needs to be proud and unapologetic again, while refusing to admit that the U.S. is the one who's destabilizing the system in the first place.
One is actually organizing supply chains, energy, and alliances. The other is giving a speech about Mozart and hoping the applause drowns out the sound of NATO moving command posts and markets drifting north.
So yeah, Rubio brought the Carney script, but he left the self-awareness at home. And while the speeches were capturing headlines, the real power shift was happening in the fine print. NATO just stripped the U.S. of major command roles. For the first time, all three joint force commands, the nerve centers of regional planning, will be led by Europeans.
This is the divorce in progress. All three joint force commands are in the places where actual planning and fighting happens. They will be led by Europeans. The UK and Italy are taking over from the USA.
Now, to be clear, this isn't an overnight demotion. It's a planned transition over time. The US still has other big roles in NATO. They're not being kicked out of the clubhouse.
But let's not pretend this is nothing. For decades, the default assumption was the US leads and everyone else falls in line around it.
Now, here's what you're seeing. We can't rely on that anymore. We need European leadership because we have no idea what Washington will look like after the next election or the next outburst on Truth Social.
And you know it's serious when NATO itself is putting out statements about redistribution of responsibilities and European allies assuming greater roles. That's polite diplomatic code for we're making sure this alliance doesn't collapse if America goes completely off the rails.
And again, think about how that fits with the bragging. You've got US politicians shouting, "We're the strongest country in history," while Europe quietly takes over more of the steering.
Imagine someone shouting, "I'm the best driver in the world," while the rest of the car silently moves the wheel out of their hands. That's what this is. A slow, careful transfer of real power. Not speeches, not merchandise, but actual command.
And Canada is in the middle of that. We're a founding member of NATO. We're plugged into this. When leadership shifts, our whole security environment changes.
The American story is, we are indispensable. The NATO story is shifting towards, we better make sure we're not dependent. We're not leaving this all in your hands anymore. You're crazy.
And remember, this comes years after Trump screaming that Europe and Canada need to do more, pay more, and carry more weight. So Europe finally went, okay, we will, just not under your thumb.
They're doing the strong move, quietly shifting responsibilities so the alliance doesn't fall apart every time an American president decides to chase applause.
While Washington is losing command of the military alliance, they're trying to brag about the only thing they have left, the Dow.
You've seen the comments. Dow, 50,000. Our president is a genius. How's your economy doing? Ha ha.
Well, that ha-ha is official punctuation of fragile confidence. Because here's the part that they forget. Numbers don't care about chance.
In 2025, the TSX in Canada had a massive year, around 30+% total return. The US markets went up, sure, but they were in the middle of the pack. Canada absolutely embarrassed the S&P 500.
And when you show them the chart, well, they absolutely lose it. Suddenly it's, well, if you adjust for the lunar cycle and the price of tea in China.
No, dudes, it's math. Canada is winning in energy, banks, and resources, the stuff that actually runs the world. While the US tech bubble makes a few billionaires rich and leaves everyone else yelling, Dow, 50,000, into the void.
Which brings us to the ultimate distraction, Pam Bondi. This moment could go into a textbook under how to dodge a question.
So she's in a congressional hearing. The topic, the Epstein files. Abuse, trafficking, networks of powerful people. The kind of case that demands actual answers.
A member of Congress asked the obvious thing. How many co-conspirators? How many indictments? What kind of accountability are we talking about?
And instead of responding to any of that, she snaps back, gets defensive, and suddenly starts talking about the stock market.
The Dow is over 50,000. The S&P is smashing records. Americans' retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about.
I'm sorry? That's not an answer. That is an escape hatch.
Yeah, it's the same trick over and over. Shift from, how did this happen? To, look at this number. Shift from, who is responsible? To, are you grateful for this line on a chart?
And the wild part is, they think this works. They think that if you toss out a big number, people will forget the original question.
Here's what this actually reveals. They know that they don't have a real answer on Epstein. They know the files are explosive. They know that there's a long list of powerful people who would rather this stay buried.
So, they've reached for the safety blanket, the Dow, not because it helps victims, but because it distracts voters.
And if you zoom out, man, it all lines up. Claim victory because the stock line went up. Ignore the fact that Canada and others actually outperformed. Pretend NATO is business as usual while allies reduce their dependence on you. And when you're questioned on one of the worst abuse scandals in modern history, try to drown it out with market cheerleading.
That's not the sign of a confident superpower, Dave. That's a country trying to talk loudly over its own record.
So what does this all mean for Canada? Well, it means we need to listen to Mark Carney, not Marco Rubio. It means the world is realizing that what Carney said is true. America is no longer the indispensable nation.
Carney's been saying it for months. The world cannot rely on the U.S. anymore. We need to build our own capacity, our own alliances, and our own stability.
Our neighbor is louder than ever and less trusted than ever. Don't be hypnotized by the Dow 50K noise. The U.S. political class is using the stock market the way that a stage musician uses a shiny object. Don't look at the Epstein file. Don't look at who's losing command roles. Just stare at this number and clap.
Instead, look at the whole picture. Look at the alliance that's rebalancing away from them. Look at allies like Canada, who are quietly becoming more important in energy, in resources, in stability.
Listen, we can't fix American policies, but we can stop importing their delusions. We can stop assuming that they're on top just because they shout the loudest.
So let us know in the comments, do you see a strong superpower or a country shouting over its own decline?
And hit like if you made it this far because clearly you enjoy pain. Subscribe if you want more politics from a couple of Canadians who read the past headline and still somehow get out of bed in the morning.
And if you want to support the channel so we can keep doing this full time, hit that join button, become part of the A-team, and help us keep building a little pocket of sanity north of the chaos.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Remember, watch your leaders, and anytime someone answers a question about justice with a stock index,
you've just learned everything you need to know about whose side they're on.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.